You call her worthless? Then explain why my wolf just bowed to her. Alpha King Adrian Blackthorn's voice cut through the royal courtyard, and for the first time that morning, the entire Frostvale pack went silent. Clara Whitmore stood in the center of the marble square with mud on her dress, dirt on her hands, and hundreds of eyes judging her like she had already been found guilty. 10 minutes earlier, she had been invisible, just an orphan Omega who cleaned abandoned wolf shelters outside the city walls. Someone the nobles passed without noticing. Someone the pack forgot existed. Until today. Look at her, Lady Evelyn Valecrest said from the steps above. Her silver gown was spotless, her smile perfectly polite. She has no family name, no territory, no royal blood. Why should anyone believe she belongs here? A few nobles whispered their agreement. Clara lowered her eyes, but she did not bow. She had learned a long time ago that some people mistook silence for weakness. I never asked to belong here, Clara said calmly. I was asked to come. The answer made the whispers louder. Lord Everett Valecrest, one of the oldest members of the Silver Council, stepped forward with a disappointed sigh. An orphan Omega with no pack history should be grateful for any attention she receives. Clara looked at him. Gratitude does not mean pretending something is true when it is not. That was the moment everything changed. Because the royal ceremony was supposed to prove which candidates could connect with the Alpha King's sacred wolf. Noble daughters from powerful families had spent weeks preparing. They wore expensive perfumes, royal colors, and family crests that had been respected for generations. Clara had arrived wearing a simple brown coat and carrying a small bag of herbs. She had not expected the wolf to notice her. She definitely had not expected him to cross the entire courtyard. Riven, the Alpha King's legendary shadow wolf, moved past every noble candidate without hesitation. The guard stiffened. The council members froze. Even Adrian Blackthorn looked surprised. Riven stopped in front of Clara. The creature that refused every handler, every healer, and every royal attendant lowered his head. Not in submission. In recognition. Clara felt something strange in her chest. A warmth. A quiet pull she could not explain. The same feeling that came whenever she helped an injured animal trust the world again. Impossible, Lord Valecrest whispered. Adrian watched her carefully from the throne platform. The Alpha King was known across the kingdoms as a man who never allowed emotions to interfere with duty. Cold, precise, unshakable. But right now, his own wolf was making a choice before he could stop it. Clara slowly reached toward Riven, but before she touched him, the council guards moved forward. This ceremony is over, Lord Valecrest announced. A mistake has been made. Clara looked down at the mud on her dress. A mistake. That was what they called her. For years, people had looked at her and only seen what she lacked. No family, no title, no protection. But Adrian Blackthorn saw something else. He saw the one person his wolf trusted. And for the first time in years, the Alpha King wondered if the pack had been wrong about someone all along. Enough, Adrian said. His voice carried across the courtyard. Anyone who believes she has no worth may leave now. Nobody moved, because everyone knew something had just happened that could change Frostvale forever. The orphan Omega they threw into the mud had just been chosen by the Alpha King's wolf. She is not a threat. Adrian Blackthorn's words surprised the entire council chamber. She is the reason my wolf finally stopped fighting me. The room went quiet. After the ceremony at Frostvale Palace, Clara Whitmore expected to be sent back to the outskirts where she had spent most of her life. She expected the nobles to laugh about the strange moment with Riven and forget her name by sunrise. She did not expect the Alpha King to personally call her into the royal chambers. The palace was unlike anything Clara had ever seen. The halls were lined with ancient stone, silver banners, and portraits of past Alpha Kings who looked like they had never smiled in their entire lives. She walked beside Adrian's guards, trying not to stare. You look like you are planning an escape route, Adrian said. Clara glanced at him. I am considering my options. For a moment, the Alpha King almost smiled. Almost. Most people entering this room are trying to impress me. That sounds exhausting. His eyes moved toward her. You are not nervous? Clara looked around the grand hallway. I am standing in a palace surrounded by people who think I do not belong here. Nervous would be a very reasonable response. Adrian studied her carefully. She did not speak like a noble. She did not act like someone searching for power. She simply told the truth. Inside him, his wolf stirred. Not with warning. With recognition. That unsettled him more than any enemy ever had. In the royal chamber, the Silver Council waited. Lord Everett Valecrest stood at the center with a serious expression. Your Majesty, with respect, this situation requires caution. A connection between your wolf and an unknown Omega cannot be ignored. Clara remained silent. She had learned that powerful people often revealed more when nobody interrupted them. Lord Valecrest continued. The sacred wolf bond has always been connected to royal bloodlines and respected families. This girl has no recorded heritage. She has something more important, Adrian replied. Riven chose her. The council members exchanged uneasy looks. Animals can be confused, one elder said. At that moment, the large shadow wolf resting near Adrian's chair lifted his head and looked directly at the elder. The room became silent again. Clara covered a small smile. Riven clearly had opinions. Adrian noticed. You find this amusing? He asked quietly. A little, Clara admitted. Your wolf seems much more honest than most people here. For the first time, Adrian looked away to hide his reaction. A servant entering the room quickly lowered his head. Your Majesty, the healers have reviewed the reports. They cannot explain why Riven responds to Miss Whitmore. Clara looked toward the wolf. Maybe because he was never looking for someone powerful. Everyone turned toward her. Maybe he was looking for someone who would listen. The words stayed in the room. Because everyone knew the Alpha King had spent years carrying the weight of the pack alone. He protected everyone, trusted almost no one. And now the one creature closest to him had chosen a person who saw past the crown. Later that evening, Adrian found Clara in the palace gardens beside Riven. The wolf rested calmly near her, something he had not done with anyone else. You are not afraid of him, Adrian said. Clara looked at the animal. He is not asking me to be afraid. Adrian was silent. The answer followed him because it was simple, but it reached somewhere deeper than he expected. For the first time in years, the Alpha King wondered if the strongest bond in his life was not the one that gave him power. Maybe it was the one that finally allowed him to trust. You keep saying you do not belong here, Clara. But every time you walk away, my wolf follows you. Adrian Blackthorn's voice was quieter than usual, but the meaning behind his words was impossible to ignore. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the palace garden, watching Riven sit beside Clara Whitmore as if the wolf had made his decision long ago. Clara looked from the wolf to Adrian. Maybe Riven simply has better judgment than the rest of your court. A small silence followed. Adrian almost smiled again, and Clara noticed. It was brief, but real. For someone known as the coldest Alpha King in generations, even a small change felt surprising. Over the next few days, Clara remained inside Frostvale Palace while the council investigated the strange bond between her and Riven. The nobles expected her to act nervous. They expected her to be overwhelmed by the royal world around her. Instead, Clara spent her mornings caring for the palace animals, fixing small problems nobody else noticed, and quietly helping creatures that had been ignored for too long. The stable workers quickly started respecting her. The servants trusted her. Even the guards who once watched her with suspicion began greeting her by name. Adrian noticed everything. He noticed how she thanked every person who helped her. He noticed how she never used Riven's connection to gain status. Most importantly, he noticed that his wolf was calmer than it had been in years. You changed something in him, Adrian said one evening while they walked through the garden. Clara looked at Riven resting near the fountain. No, I listened to him. Adrian looked away. Most people think listening is a weakness. That is probably why most people misunderstand each other. The answer stayed with him, because Adrian knew exactly what it felt like to be misunderstood. As Alpha King, everyone saw the crown, the authority, and the decisions. Almost nobody saw the pressure behind it. The constant expectation to be perfect. The fear that one mistake could affect thousands of members of the pack. That night, Adrian finally admitted something he had never told anyone. When I became Alpha King, I was taught that emotions make leaders vulnerable. Clara turned toward him. And do you believe that? He paused. His wolf shifted quietly inside him. I used to. Clara studied him. Maybe emotions do not make leaders weak. Maybe refusing to understand them does. Before Adrian could answer, the garden lights flickered. A messenger from the council arrived with urgent news. Lord Everett Valecrest had requested an emergency meeting. The council had discovered old records connected to Clara's past. Records that raised questions about where she came from and why she had been abandoned as a child. Clara's expression changed for the first time. Not fear. Something deeper. Pain from a question she had carried for years. They found something about my family, she asked. The messenger lowered his head. Yes, Miss Whitmore. And Lord Valecrest believes it changes everything. Adrian looked at Clara, then at the council seal in the messenger's hand. He knew politics. He knew the council never moved without a reason. Someone was trying to use Clara's past against her. But for the first time in years, Adrian did not think like a king protecting a throne. He thought like a man who had finally found someone worth protecting. You will not face this alone, he said. Clara looked at him. Your Majesty, you barely know me. Adrian's eyes met hers. Maybe, but my wolf does. And for reasons he could not explain, that was enough. Before anyone judges her past, they should first explain why they erased it. Adrian Blackthorn's words were calm, but the entire council chamber felt the weight behind them. Clara Whitmore stood beside the Alpha King as the old records were placed on the table. The documents were worn, the pages faded by time, but the name written across the first page made everyone in the room pay attention. Whitmore, a name that had disappeared from Frostvale history almost 20 years ago. Lord Everett Valecrest folded his hands. Your Majesty, this is not about judgment. It is about protecting the pack. Clara looked at the papers. Protecting the pack from what? A person who spent her life caring for abandoned animals. The council members exchanged uncomfortable looks. Lord Valecrest did not answer immediately. That silence told Clara more than his words could have. Adrian noticed too. He had spent years reading people across negotiation tables and battle rooms. He knew when someone was hiding something. Explain the records, Adrian ordered. The elder council member opened the file. Her family was connected to an old group known as the Wolf Keepers. They were believed to have a rare ability to understand pack bonds. Clara listened quietly. She had always known there was something unusual about her connection with animals, but she never imagined it was connected to an old legacy. And why was this information removed? Adrian asked. The room became colder. Lord Valecrest answered carefully. Because some traditions belong in the past. Clara looked at him. That sounds like another way of saying someone wanted them forgotten. Adrian watched her reaction. She was not angry. She was hurt. There was a difference. She had spent her whole life believing she was abandoned because she was not important. Now she was discovering that someone had worked very hard to make sure she never knew who she was. Later that afternoon, Adrian found Clara near the old training grounds with Riven. The wolf sat beside her quietly while she held the forgotten records in her hands. You are angry, Adrian said. Clara looked up. I am trying not to be. Why? She gave a small, tired smile. Because anger is easy. Understanding is harder. Adrian stepped closer. Most people would want revenge. Maybe. But I do not want people to suffer because of what happened to me. That answer surprised him. Adrian had spent his entire life preparing for enemies. He knew how to handle threats. He knew how to defend a kingdom. But Clara was different. She did not seek power from pain. She carried pain and still chose kindness. His wolf reacted before he could hide his emotions. Riven moved closer to Clara and rested beside her. Adrian looked away, pretending not to notice. Clara noticed anyway. Your wolf disagrees with you often, does he not? She asked. Adrian almost laughed. More than I would like. Maybe that is why he chose someone who listens. The word stayed with him. That evening, Adrian attended a private council meeting. Lord Valecrest pushed harder than before. An unknown Omega with a forgotten bloodline cannot stand beside the Alpha King. Adrian looked across the table. You mean someone without your approval? The elder's expression changed slightly. It was small, but Adrian saw it. The council was not afraid of Clara because she lacked power. They were afraid because she represented something they could not control. A different kind of leadership. A bond built on trust instead of status. When Adrian returned to the garden, Clara was waiting with Riven. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian said quietly, They underestimated you. Clara looked at him. They still might. Adrian shook his head. No. They underestimated what happens when someone finally sees your worth. And for the first time, Clara believed he meant it. You cannot protect the pack by destroying the person who might save it. Adrian Blackthorn's voice was calm, but everyone inside the council chamber felt the warning behind his words. The meeting had lasted for nearly 2 hours, and the same argument had been repeated again and again. Clara Whitmore was dangerous. Clara Whitmore was unknown. Clara Whitmore did not belong near the Alpha King. But Adrian had started noticing something. The people who questioned her worth the loudest were the same people who benefited from keeping her powerless. Lord Everett Valecrest stood near the council table with a serious expression. Your Majesty, this is not personal. The pack requires stability. Traditions exist for a reason. Adrian looked at the old council member. Traditions are meant to protect people, not hide mistakes. The room became silent. Nobody expected the Alpha King to challenge the council so directly. For years, Adrian had been known as a leader who listened before making decisions. But he had never openly opposed the elders. Not until now. Not until Clara. Outside the chamber, Clara had no idea what was happening. She was in the palace gardens with Riven, helping a group of young wolves that had become nervous after the recent changes in the palace. One small pup refused to leave the corner of the garden. The guards had tried everything. Treats, training, gentle commands. Nothing worked. Clara simply sat nearby and waited. You know, she whispered. Everyone keeps telling you to be less afraid. Nobody asks why you are afraid. Slowly, the little wolf moved closer. A few minutes later, it rested beside her. One of the guards watching from a distance shook his head in disbelief. How does she do that? Another guard answered quietly. Maybe she listens to what everyone else ignores. Adrian arrived moments later and saw the scene. He did not interrupt. He simply watched. The woman the council considered insignificant had done something his best trainers could not. She made someone feel safe. You are always working, Clara said when she noticed him. Adrian glanced at the wolf pup. So are you. I do not have a kingdom to manage. No, he replied. But you carry things that most people would not notice. Clara looked at him. Is that your way of saying I worry too much? No, Adrian paused. It is my way of saying you are stronger than you realize. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The connection between them felt different now. Not rushed, not forced, just a quiet understanding growing between two people who had spent most of their lives carrying burdens alone. But that peace did not last. That evening, during the royal gathering, the council announced a new concern. Riven had become unusually protective of Clara. Some members claimed the bond was affecting Adrian's judgment. Then, during the ceremony, something unexpected happened. Riven suddenly stepped away from Adrian and moved toward Clara. The entire hall watched as the royal wolf stood beside her instead of the Alpha King. Whispers spread instantly. Lord Valecrest used the moment. You see? The bond is influencing him. Clara looked around the room. For the first time since entering the palace, she felt the weight of everyone's suspicion again. Adrian stepped forward, but he hesitated. The council was watching. The nobles were watching. The entire pack was watching. And Clara saw that hesitation. It was only a second, but it was enough. Because she had finally found someone who believed in her, and now she wondered if he would still choose her when choosing her came with a cost. Later that night, Adrian found her preparing to leave the palace gardens. You are leaving? He asked. Clara looked at him quietly. I do not want to become another problem you have to solve. Adrian's expression changed. You are not a problem. Then why did you look uncertain when they questioned me? He had no answer. Because for the first time, the Alpha King who could face enemies without fear realized there was one thing he was afraid of. Losing the person who had made him question everything he believed about power, duty, and trust. If my presence threatens your crown, then maybe your crown was never as strong as you believed. Clara Whitmore's words were quiet, but they stayed with Adrian Blackthorne long after she walked away. The palace gardens had never felt so empty. For the first time in years, the Alpha King found himself standing alone without knowing what decision to make. Adrian had faced border disputes, political pressure, and challenges from powerful leaders. He had always known what to do. Protect the pack. Preserve order. Put duty first. But Clara was not a political problem to solve. She was a person who had trusted him, and he had allowed his hesitation to hurt her. Inside him, his wolf was restless. Riven had been unusually quiet since Clara left the garden. Adrian understood why. The wolf was not angry at Clara. He was disappointed in him. The next morning, Clara prepared to leave Frostvale Palace. She packed the same small bag she had arrived with. A few clothes, her herbs, the old journal she carried from the orphan shelter. Everything that reminded her she had survived before anyone knew her name. You are really leaving, a servant named Hannah said softly. Clara smiled faintly. I came here without a title. I can leave the same way. Hannah looked down. But you changed this place. Clara looked around the garden. She saw the animals that trusted her, the workers who finally felt noticed, and the small moments where the palace had started feeling less cold. Maybe, she said, but some places only welcome you when you are useful. Before Hannah could answer, a message arrived from the outskirts of Frostvale. Several wolves from the Northern Territory had become unsettled. The pack leaders were asking for help. Clara knew immediately what that meant. The same bond she carried was not limited to Riven. It was connected to something older, something the council had tried to erase. Meanwhile, Adrian faced Lord Veilcrest again. This time, he was done listening to half-truths. You knew about Clara's family, Adrian said. The elder remained calm. I knew enough. Enough to remove their records? Silence. That was the answer. Adrian's expression hardened. You did not protect the pack. You protected your control over it. Lord Veilcrest looked at him carefully. And what happens when the pack chooses her over you? Adrian did not answer immediately, because that was the question he had secretly feared. What if the pack trusted Clara more than their Alpha King? What if the old way of ruling was not the right way anymore? Later that day, Adrian found Clara preparing supplies for the Northern Territory. You were going there alone? He asked. Clara looked up. Someone needs to help them. You could have asked the palace for support. Would they have listened? Adrian had no answer. Because he knew the truth. Many members of the pack would only believe her after she proved herself. Clara picked up her bag. I do not need everyone to understand me, Adrian. I just need to know I am doing the right thing. Hearing his name from her changed something. Not Alpha King. Not Your Majesty. Just Adrian. For a moment, the distance between them disappeared. I was wrong, he said. Clara looked at him. The words seemed difficult for a man who carried a kingdom on his shoulders. I should have stood beside you. She studied his face, searching for a reason to believe him. Will you stand beside me now? Adrian looked toward the palace, toward the council, toward everything he had spent his life protecting. Then he looked back at Clara. Yes. But before they could leave, a royal messenger arrived with urgent news. The Northern Wolves were not the only ones in trouble. Someone had discovered Clara's old records, and the council was preparing to reveal a secret about her past before the entire pack. Adrian's expression changed. The battle ahead would not be fought with swords or armies. It would be fought with truth. And this time, he would not let Clara face it alone. The pack does not need a perfect leader. It needs an honest one. Clara Whitmore's words echoed through the northern valley as Adrian Blackthorne stood beside her, watching hundreds of wolves gather beneath the Frostvale Mountains. For generations, this territory had followed old rules. The strongest spoke. The weakest stayed silent. But everything was changing, and everyone knew it. After leaving the palace, Clara expected suspicion. She expected people to question why an Orphan Omega was standing beside the Alpha King. She did not expect the Northern Wolves to recognize her immediately. The moment she entered the valley, the restless animals became calm. Wolves that had refused every healer stepped closer. Young pups stopped hiding. Older wolves watched her carefully, as if remembering something they had forgotten. Adrian noticed the same thing Riven had shown him weeks earlier. Clara did not command the wolves. She connected with them. Your family really was part of this, Adrian said quietly. Clara looked toward the mountains. I think they were. I just wish someone had told me before I spent my entire life wondering why I was different. Adrian had no answer, because he understood that feeling more than anyone. The world saw him as powerful because he was Alpha King. But nobody saw the lonely boy who had inherited a throne before he was ready. As they investigated the northern records, they discovered something hidden inside the old pack archives. The Wolf Keepers were not a rival bloodline. They were protectors of the bond between Alpha and Pack. Their role was not to control wolves. It was to make sure leaders never forgot who they were protecting. They were afraid of you, Adrian said when he finished reading the records. Clara looked confused. Why would anyone be afraid of me? Because you remind them that power is not the same as leadership. Before Clara could answer, a messenger arrived from Frostvale Palace. The council had called an emergency gathering. Lord Veilcrest was preparing to reveal Clara's past before the entire pack. Adrian's expression changed immediately. He wants to turn your history into a weakness. Clara closed the old journal she had been holding. Then let him. Adrian looked at her. You are not afraid? She took a breath. I have spent my entire life being judged by people who never knew me. At some point, you stop being afraid of losing something you never truly had. Those words stayed with Adrian. Because Clara was not fighting for a title. She was fighting for the right to exist without being ashamed of where she came from. On the journey back to the palace, Adrian finally told her the truth about his own fear. When I became Alpha King, I thought trust was something leaders gave after everyone proved themselves. Clara looked at him. And now, Adrian watched Riven walking ahead of them. Now I think trust is what allows people to become better. It was the closest thing to an apology he had ever given. Clara did not answer immediately, but she did not walk away either. When they reached Frostvale Palace, the atmosphere had changed. The council members were already waiting. Noble families filled the grand hall. Everyone wanted to know the truth about the Orphan Omega who had been chosen by the royal wolf. Lord Veilcrest stepped forward with a confident smile. Before this pack accepts her, they deserve to know who she really is. Clara stood still. Adrian moved beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. Because he finally understood something important. Protecting Clara did not mean speaking for her. It meant making sure she had the chance to speak for herself. And tomorrow, before the entire pack, the truth would finally come out. Before you decide what she is worth, remember this. She was the only person who saw this pack when everyone else looked away. Adrian Blackthorn's voice carried across the grand hall of Frostvale Palace. Every noble, every council member, and every wolf in the room turned toward the Alpha King. The gathering was supposed to be about Clara Whitmore's past. Instead, it became the moment Adrian finally stopped allowing others to control the story. Lord Everett Veilcrest stood before the council table with the old records in his hands. Your Majesty, the pack deserves honesty. This woman's family disappeared for a reason. Clara stood quietly beside Adrian. She could feel every stare around her. Some were curious. Some were suspicious. Some were waiting for her to fail. It was the same feeling she had known her entire life. Being judged before anyone bothered to know her. Lord Veilcrest opened the records. The Whitmore family was connected to the ancient wolf keepers. Their abilities created division in the past. They believed they could understand the bond between Alpha and Pack better than traditional leaders. Adrian looked at him. They believed leaders should listen. The elder council member ignored him. Their methods challenged the authority of the Alpha line. Clara finally spoke. Is that what happened? Or did they simply question people who did not want to be questioned? The hall became silent. Lord Veilcrest's expression tightened. You speak boldly for someone who spent her life outside the pack. Clara looked around the room. Maybe because I spent my life outside the walls, I saw things those inside forgot. The words surprised everyone, including Adrian. Because Clara was not asking for acceptance. She was telling the truth. Then Lord Veilcrest revealed the final piece of his argument. He claimed Clara's connection with Riven was not a true bond. He suggested the royal wolf had simply reacted to her unusual ability. The room filled with whispers. Adrian watched Clara carefully. He knew this was the moment that mattered. If he stepped forward too quickly, people would say he was protecting her because of personal feelings. If he stayed silent, he would repeat the same mistake from before. So he did something different. He gave Clara the choice. Tell them, Adrian said quietly. Clara looked at him. Tell them what? Tell them what you know. Not what they expect. Clara took a breath and stepped forward. She spoke about the orphan shelters, the abandoned wolves, the injured animals nobody had time for. She explained that she never learned her ability from a royal teacher. She learned it by listening, by caring, by paying attention when others were too busy chasing power. The bond was never about controlling wolves, Clara said. It was never about proving someone is better than someone else. It was about understanding. As she finished speaking, the entire hall remained quiet. Then Riven moved. The royal wolf walked across the floor and stopped beside Clara. This time, nobody tried to stop him. He lowered his head, not as a servant, not as a symbol, but as recognition. Adrian felt his own wolf respond. The connection between them became impossible to ignore. The mate bond was not created by status. It was not chosen by wealth or family name. It was built on trust. Lord Veilcrest looked unsettled for the first time. This changes nothing, he said. But everyone heard the uncertainty in his voice. Adrian stepped forward. No, it changes everything. He looked at the council. For years, we believed strength meant standing above others. Maybe real strength is knowing when to stand beside them. The hall remained silent. Then one by one, members of the pack lowered their heads toward Clara. Not because she demanded respect, because she had earned it. But as the ceremony ended, Adrian noticed something hidden among the old records. A missing page. A forgotten signature. Someone had not only erased Clara's family from history, someone had rewritten the entire truth. And whoever did it was still inside the pack. The truth was not lost. It was hidden. Adrian Blackthorne stood inside the ancient royal archive, holding the missing page that had been removed from Clara Whitmore's family records. The room was quiet except for the sound of old paper moving in his hand. For years, the Frostvale Pack believed they knew their history. They believed the Wolf Keepers had disappeared because they were dangerous. But the truth was far more complicated. Clara stood beside him, reading the faded writing carefully. This was not a record of betrayal, she whispered. It was a record of protection. Adrian nodded slowly. The missing page revealed that the Wolf Keepers had worked alongside previous Alpha Kings. They were not rivals. They were advisors who reminded leaders that a pack was not built only on strength. It was built on trust. Lord Everett Valecrest had not simply hidden Clara's family. He had hidden a lesson the pack was never supposed to forget. When the truth reached the council, the reaction was immediate. Some members were ashamed. Others were angry, not because Clara was wrong, but because admitting the truth meant admitting that the old system had failed. Adrian stood before the pack once more. This time, he did not stand above them on the royal platform. He stood among them. A leader's responsibility is not to protect a title, Adrian said. It is to protect the people who trust that title. The hall remained silent. These were not easy words for an Alpha King to say. Admitting mistakes was not something powerful leaders were usually taught. But Adrian understood something he had never understood before. A crown could command respect. It could not create loyalty. Loyalty had to be earned. Lord Valecrest stepped forward. He did not apologize immediately. Pride kept him silent for a long moment. But eventually, he lowered his head. I believe control was the same as protection, he admitted. I was wrong. It was not a perfect apology. It did not erase years of damage. But it was the first honest thing he had said in a long time. Clara watched quietly. She knew some wounds took longer to heal than others. Forgiveness did not mean pretending the past never happened. It meant refusing to let the past decide the future. Months later, Frostvale began to change. The old rules that judged people by family name were replaced by traditions that valued ability, character, and loyalty. Clara did not become important because she stood beside the Alpha King. She became important because she had always been important. The difference was that now everyone could finally see it. She continued caring for animals across the kingdom, but she also helped train future healers and taught young wolves that strength did not mean never needing help. Adrian changed too. He was still the Alpha King. He was still respected, but the people around him noticed the difference. He listened more. He trusted more. He no longer believed that carrying every burden alone made him stronger. One evening, Adrian found Clara in the palace garden where Riven had first chosen her. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. Clara smiled slightly. "The day everyone thought I had nothing?" Adrian looked at her. "The day everyone was wrong." She looked toward the garden, remembering the girl who had arrived with a small bag and no name anyone respected. "I used to think my worth depended on someone finally noticing me." Adrian shook his head. "Your worth was always there. The mistake was that we were too blind to see it." Riven settled beside them, clearly satisfied that the humans had finally learned what he knew from the beginning. The story of Frostvale was no longer about an Alpha King saving an Orphan Omega. It was about a leader learning that power without compassion becomes empty. It was about an Omega discovering that dignity does not come from a title, a family name, or the approval of others. And it was about a bond that proved the strongest connections are not the ones created by power, but the ones built through trust, kindness, and the courage to see someone for who they truly are.